Hello there, survivors. Today we're taking a look at some of my best builds in 2024 in ARK Survival Ascended. We'll be taking a look at all of my builds from the island that we started the year on to the frontier of Scorched Earth, the Steampunk on Aberration, this Wasteland that we just jump into with Extinction, but of course also Svartalfheim, Astraeus, and the center. There's a lot of builds to take a look at. We won't actually be visiting them in order necessarily. Some I've ordered in a certain style or theme, and others are on a map-by-map basis, but we have a lot of builds to get through. But before we do that, 2024 was an amazing year, and I want to thank you so much for all the support that year, and I'm looking forward to make 2025 a great year and bring you many more builds in ARK. And as always, of course, feel free to leave any suggestions you have for builds that you would like to see me make down in the comments below, whether that's another big Tek Base, another ruin rebuild, or maybe just a simple dodo shack. But before we get to creating new awesome builds in 2025, let's take a look back at what we built in 2024. And we're kicking it off with the ultimate Tek base that I did on the island. This was actually the first time I ever used Tek, and the first time I went really big and modern like this, and it turned out really nice. I think still this is one of the better bases, especially if you want a big base where you can do pretty much everything. Of course, using the A-frame designs in the middle and then the big base on the side to really create a good space of this. And yeah, I still really like this base. We actually still use it on the island on my community cluster. It's one of the community centers that people can visit. And this one is definitely a fun one because this is a one that I've seen a lot of people build on different servers, different worlds, and share their screenshots with me on Discord or Twitter. It's always good to see when you guys use one of the designs. Then we dive into the water to take a look at the underwater Tek base that we did on the island as well. It's got a similar design language to the other Tek base, but then of course based around the vacuum compartments. I'm still not quite happy how they changed the look of these. You used to be able to make them look a lot nicer, but I mean, at least if you need an underwater base, I guess this is a pretty easy way to go from your basic box into something that looks a little bit better. And then we're going big, and then we're going into the desert with one of my biggest builds of the year, the gigantic Tek Pyramid that I built on Scorched Earth, kind of starting the tradition, of course, to build at least one Tek base on each map. And being a Scorched Earth, I thought a Tek Pyramid was the right choice. I kind of went way too big with the foundations, however, and that turned this into a ginormous base. This is way too big. I think I even said in the video, I don't recommend anyone building this, but people did, and people have tried. It definitely will give you enough space. You will hit the build limit, very likely, but yeah, it is a cool base. I still love the design of this, and I love that fact that all the sides have basically their own thing going on, which is really cool. But yeah, it might be a little bit too big to use because there's so much space in this one, but the design does look really cool. And then we're diving into the oceans of the center, and we got the floating ocean base, a very modern looking design. I actually really liked building this one. Of course, this is just using some foundation on the ocean floor to kind of support the whole base, but it does give you a really cool effect of this floating box in the sky. It's a nice easy outpost if you maybe don't want to live full-time on the water but just want a place where you can quickly teleport to or fly to, then take out your cryo water tames and go into the ocean, because especially on the center it's very likely that you'll end up diving there someday. And that's also why we have another ocean Tek base here, a big one. It's definitely shares some design language with the first Tek bases that I did, but yeah, this one is another big base, definitely focused around the fact that it has a bunch of optional water pens. The big A-frames are actually squares, so there's also the same A-frame down below in the ocean, which creates some very safe water pens for you to breed some of the smaller to medium medium-sized water tames that can fit inside. And then, of course, we have the giant water pen behind the base as well. But the base itself also has those 2 A-frames to use as your main base for storage, crafting, hatching other dinos, cryos, whatever you need. And then you've got the middle section, maybe for like your bedroom or whatever else you want to have in your base. It's definitely a big one and definitely a good one to use if you like living on the ocean. The only thing is that you will need the right spot to build this, because you kind of need the depth, of course, in the water as well to be able to work with, but you don't want it to be too deep, because then you just have a lot of structures to get to the ocean floor. Then we also built a modern Woodland Mansion on the center. This was actually really fun. This was based around some real-life architecture, trying to bring that to ARK, but it also was me playing around with the modern theme a little bit more. Instead of going always very techy, we used a little bit more of some of the rustic looks as well. The A-frame looks a little bit more rustic, and then we have the other side, which looks very, very modern. It was actually a really fun blend of those two kind of meet each other in the middle. And yeah, definitely makes for an interesting base as well, because you have a lot of space on the inside. You can choose either one of the sections actually to kind of be more of a Dino Pen, and the other one be more of the storage, crafting, etc., whatever you need in there. But yeah, you definitely do have a fair amount of space in this base. And I actually also really like the balcony section on the outside that you can either use for maybe some plants, but also definitely could be your open outdoor crafting area if you just want to be able to enjoy the views whilst you do the work. And then I built this Tek Breeding Facility for one of my friends on the center as well. It's kind of themed around the Biosin building from Jurassic World, but yeah, it's basically a big circle with a lot of space for you to breed some creatures. For us specifically, this was where she bred all the pyromanes to perfection, and yeah, it was a really fun design. It was based on a little sketch she made of like a circle with some rooms at the end for you know, neatly lining up the creatures and making sure everything was possible. And then it kind of turned into this very modern techie design with the garden on the roof, which is a really fun touch to do as well. And yeah, I definitely think this came out really, really nice, and yeah, still really happy with this design. And if you think modern and you think techie and advanced technology, you of course think Tony Stark. So I decided to try and build a Stark mansion on the center as well. And yeah, I really like the way these shapes came out. The rounded design. The only downside with these designs in ARK is that the way these triangle structures work is that they make things not line up anymore perfectly. So you have a lot of overlapping that is required to kind of work away the rough edges, which, I mean, is not a problem, but it does make it a little bit more complicated to work with these builds. But considering all that, I think the idea of this definitely works very well. I love the different layers to the build, and again, the circular design, just to kind of change things up completely, step away from the A-frames that I did a lot of, just to kind of build something that is completely different to the other Tek bases. And then elaboration, it was time for a little Tek Outpost as well, of course, and I actually added like a Jurassic World inspired Dino Pen to it as well. In this case, of course, to be used for Reapers, but it was kind of based around the Indominus Rex pen of the movie. And yeah, I think this came out really well. I did make tutorials for this and actually made 2 versions, so you can just build the little outpost to the side as a separate structure, or you can build the whole thing with the big Dino Pen as well, depending on what your needs are. I think actually the outpost would be quite fun if you just need a small little base. But yeah, if you do need a big Dino Pen because you've got some breeding planned, then definitely that is of course always a good option to have. And then we got the futuristic ocean base that I made on Astraeos. And this is another one definitely of my favorite designs. It combines some of the things that I learned along the way. We see the round design coming back from the Tek Breeding Facility, but then bringing it to an ocean base. This of course has an underwater pen for some breeding. It even has a Shasta dock to the side. It has these long landing pads as well, so you can easily bring your flyers over, park them, even the wyverns, rhinos, every big flyer can still easily park here as well. And then of course you have the living quarters upstairs for all your storage, your crafting needs, and then a lovely garden on top to kind of bring that greenery to the ocean. And yeah, I still really love this design. I don't know what it is, but the green roofs just really work for me, and they're not too difficult to do. But it's still a shame that for some reason we still don't have a triangle thatch ceiling in the normal game. Why not? Why can't we have that? But yeah, maybe we'll have that someday. And then I decided I've been building so many big modern Tek bases. Let's go a little bit smaller. If you still want the modern design, but you maybe don't want to go crazy and all out for your base, or you just want a base a little bit earlier in your playthrough when you don't have all that many materials to spend yet. And that was this modern house design, of course, utilizing custom cosmetics in the best way possible to really transform the look of the build. And I really went for the test and true contrast, of course, of the white and black textures, which definitely work very well in this design, I think. And it's actually a decent base. You have a small inbuilt Dino Pen, you have plenty of space for storage, for crafting, and of course a little bedroom as well, and some balconies to enjoy the view from around your base too. And then just before we jumped into Extinction, I decided to build this big epic Tek base. And this kind of felt like the whole year came round, because we started with the ultimate Tek base that I did on the island. And this kind of feels like the spiritual successor of that base, the ultimate Tek base 2.0, which has, yeah, it's a big base. It has a behemoth gate, so all the bigger tames can also enter as long as they can fit through a behemoth gate. And yeah, you have another breeding bay, you have your storage and crafting bay, and of course you have some upstairs quarters as well, which definitely means that this is a base that you can easily use for, well, your end game process, because there's so much space, there's a lot of room for breeding in here on purpose, which makes it very versatile in the use. And even for bigger tribes, I think this would be a really cool base to use. That's why I also decided to rebuild it again on my Extinction community server so that people can actually visit it. We actually use it as the community center on Extinction, on my community cluster, which means that this is the place where people can come and drop off some gear they don't need anymore, and new people can come and look for some gear to get them started, as well as dinos, of course. So we kind of help each other out here, and it's always just a nice way to visit some of my builds yourself. And that's not all, because just before the year ended, I decided to embrace the A-frames again and made a little all-in-one, well, it's not really little, but an all-in-one Tek A-frame base. And yeah, this one is pretty nice as well. It has a big A-frame as the main size of the structure, but then a little side part as well for your dinos. And I made sure to make it big enough that even a Giga can fit inside. Yeah, for the rest, it's not a build that is too difficult to make. It's not as giant as the previous Tek build, but that might be really convenient if you don't want to go big, or maybe the structure is limiting you just because of the amount of structures that you need for some of the other designs. This is a really cool one to still have that very modern look, especially using custom cosmetics again to get the really modern vibe for this one, but still have enough space to do pretty much the things that you need. Your storage system, your crafting, a room for breeding, and then some personal quarters upstairs for like your respawn, your beds, your sleeping pods, whatever you use. We've seen a lot of Tek bases, modern bases. Let's take a look at some of the simpler designs, like the treehouse that I did on the island, which was a really fun little project because I hadn't built anything on a tree platform yet, so this was kind of the first attempt. I did make it a little bit more complicated than it maybe needs to be, but I think this is still a really fun, like, little clubhouse, tribe house to live with some of your tribe mates in a tree if you decide to go that route. But of course, the downsides of these kinds of builds, especially for tutorials, is that it really depends on the exact shape of the tree whether this is going to work for you or not. And then, of course, the very traditional beach hut had to be one that I had to try at some point. I'm actually surprised that it took me this long to make a beach hut design, but for the center launch, I decided to go ahead. And we made this little tiki hut inspired build on the beach, which is really nice to build and easy to expand, of course. If you need more, you can just kind of add more huts and platforms as you go. That's actually also what I did to start my center playthrough myself. And because I did a treehouse, I kind of got inspired, like, what if I combine my A-frames with those tree houses? And that's why I built an A-frame design to work as a treehouse base. Although you could definitely just build this A-frame design somewhere else and it would just work as a normal base. But yeah, definitely think a A-frame treehouse is a fun way to go. And because actually all of the A-frames that I build aren't really the way that I envision them and that I would like to have them, because in real life A-frames are usually a lot steeper. But unfortunately, we don't have those pieces in ARK unless you go the modded route, which is what I did for this build using Architect Structures Remastered, which is definitely my favorite building mod out there. Just gives a lot of extra pieces that definitely some of them should just be part of the normal build system, and that allows you to get builds that are a lot closer to A-frames or builds in real life, because you can do a lot more different shape, like in this case specifically the steeper structure. So the steeper roof, the steeper slope walls, kind of what we need in ARK. I really hope that one day we might get those, but yeah, for now we'll use the mod to get these designs, and that definitely makes that you can on a much smaller footprint still get a pretty decently sized base that you can use as an outpost or just as your main base, because yeah, you get a lot of space in a smaller footprint. And then, believe it or not, I did actually build a Greek temple underwater on the center in one of the bubbles. This was before we knew we were getting Astraeos, and of course the Greek builds definitely improved with that, but this was definitely a fun challenge to do. I kind of just wanted to use a design using the stacked water reservoirs on each other to kind of create these pillars, and it definitely works. Might not be the cheapest thing to do, but it's definitely a nice touch, because you get not only a very different pillar, a bigger pillar than you normally have, but also of course the round shape just kind of breaks up a build in a whole new way. And then I built Hagrid's hut on the center as well on my community server. This was part of my tribe base actually, because one of the tribe mates was building Hogwarts on the center, and then I decided, you know, I'm gonna live close to you, but I'm not gonna interfere with your amazing build process, so I'll just build a little Hagrid's hut on the edge of the redwoods, which turned out really nice, of course using some modded structures to get some better shapes in, but yeah, still really one of my favorite little cozy builds. And yeah, I kind of used this as my base on the center for the whole time that we used the center as the main map. Eventually, however, I decided to expand my influence on Hogwarts just by a tiny bit, and I built the Owlery Tower based on the one from Hogwarts Legacy. And this was because we were adding owl griffins to our maps, so it just really felt right to add this little tower. Again, using some of those Architect Structures Remastered structures for the extra shapes that you can create with them. But yeah, I do really still love the way that this tower came out. And now, especially now that we also have snow owls in the game, I still really think that this is a fun little design to basically have an aviary added to your base. And then this build actually surprised me, because I do a lot of modern builds, but I also try to still make builds in different styles. And then I decided just to make, in my mind, a relatively simple log cabin. But the reaction to this actually surprised me a lot. A lot of people seem to like these types of builds. So that reminds me that sometimes, you know, I should try these simpler designs. I guess it's also a more realistic way to play the game, right? Because it's a lot easier to build a log cabin than to instantly go to a giant tech base. So yeah, this kind of has everything you need as well. It has an entrance for dinos, so you can easily drop off things you've gathered. You have the storage system place. You have your crafting rooms. You have your bedrooms. Whatever you need inside, you can definitely fit there. And it's just a nice little simple, maybe more traditional ARK build. And then kind of inspired by the Owlery, but then closer to what you can do within the normal game, is this little wizard's tower, which was also designed as an aviary for some of your flyer feathery friends. Or the pterodon is also welcome. I know he doesn't have feathers, but yeah, you can park some of your flyers safely here. I especially love the part where the walkway kind of goes underneath the bridge that connects the two little towers. Yeah, just gives me wizards vibes. I just wanted to do this. I was going to build a whole castle next to it. Didn't end up doing that. But yeah, this little tower, definitely a fun little addition that you can have next to your build to park your flyers in a fun and creative way. And then I did these simple Viking houses in Svartalfheim, kind of to test around with the new Klinger Fur structures that he added to his rustic build mod. And yeah, these structures are really good for these types of build. And it was fun just to kind of go back to, sometimes it's really fun to go back to these very simple starter houses that can easily be your home early on in the game. And yeah, I always like the Viking style. I think it's a very popular style for a reason. It's just a really fun vibe to go for, and especially with these structures you can get some really cozy feeling builds. And then we're jumping way ahead to a very recent build of mine, this modern A-frame that I built on the rooftops of Extinction. I also really like this one for similar reasons. It's a smaller build, much more reasonable to be building this very early on to use as your main base. And of course, using custom cosmetics, it really doesn't matter too much which structures you use to build it, which means you can really start building this right away and then just use the modern structure skins to transform the look into a modern build like this, which is quite cool if you want to go for the luxury vibe. And I think Extinction is probably the best map for these types of build in the city. They just really feel at home. Then we're jumping into some themed builds. First of all, Castle Black was a project that we finished early in the year. It was one of the builds that I did fully on stream every time. And it's Castle Black inspired from Game of Thrones, but not really built block by block or something. We have, of course, the main long hall, the mess hall, where the Night's Watch would gather. We've got some nice wall designs, although I don't think these are the best wall designs that I've done, but it's still a really fun looking base. And this is another base that you can actually visit for yourself if you join my community server. Then this base was actually built whilst waiting for the next map to finally release. Herbivore Island I decided to turn into this little paradise with some Japanese inspired builds like the Japanese castle. We got a pagoda that I used as kind of an aviary. We got this Japanese bridge as well that kind of hides the behemoth gate that entrances the water pen here. But yeah, this was a really fun little project, making these different very themed builds in one spot and still trying to save most of the natural resources if you actually want to go for this base on Herbivore Island. And because I really enjoyed working in this style, I actually tried to replicate this in Svartalfheim as well, but then using some of the modded structures because they make some of the shapes a lot easier. You have a lot more options to play around with to get a lot closer to what these structures would look like in real life as well. But pretty much the same types of builds, just kind of elevated to show that you can even use these build tutorials using mostly vanilla structures to spice them up if you have some mods available. And speaking of Svartalfheim, the main project, of course, that I worked on this map was my giant Hogwarts-inspired castle. It kind of just started as, I want to build a castle on top of this mountain, and then it turned into, let's build Hogwarts, I suppose. It's a giant base. It has so many different rooms, hallways connecting each other, staircases. It's absolutely ridiculously big. I had to raise the build limit for this as well, just to be able to finish it. Yeah. But it was a fun challenge, a fun project for me to use some more modded structures like architect structures remastered, like the dwarven structures. Yeah, just a really fun project and a giant cool castle that you can visit if you have Svartalfheim Premium on my community server too. And believe it or not, I hadn't watched the Jurassic Park or Jurassic World movies before last year. But I did finally watch them in 2024, and I instantly, of course, fell in love with them and got inspired to do some builds. One of these was the visitor center from the original Jurassic Park movie, which I built on the center on a community server as the community center for people to be welcomed, for people to exchange gear that they no longer need, and a place to exchange dinos or adopt dinos that other players don't need anymore. But the first Jurassic build that I did was actually the Raptor Paddock from Jurassic World, because I thought that was a really fun challenge to get that into ARK, but a very convenient one, of course, because whether you're using it for raptors or other tames, having a nicely designed Dino Pen is, of course, something that we can all use as soon as we start breeding. I think with the limits of ARK, we came pretty close to having one that definitely is recognizable from the one in the movie. And there's still a fire burning to start building a proper Jurassic Park / Jurassic World builds park as well, with a bunch of these builds, and I think that's one of the projects that we'll do in 2025. Of course, just before Extinction Drop, we kind of tried out this new premium mod, ARK Medieval, Goblins and Guilds, and they have a lot of amazing structures in that mod that use procedural generation to get a lot of variation in the same kind of structures. So we started working on our Goblin Camp, and we did a fun few builds there, some Goblin Hearts, some big crafting halls there, and of course the Chieftain Hut to kind of crown it all off. Another project I really enjoyed working on this year was the Viking Village that I did together with Laws at Lance, but also Johnny from my community, and this was the build that we did during a live stream for Extra Life. That's what makes it so special, but it's also just really fun to collaborate with other people on builds like this, because sometimes, you know, building can get a little bit lonely if you're always building your own bases, and it was actually a fun challenge to see, can we actually work on the same project at the same time with pretty much no preparation at all. I think we decided kind of the same day we're gonna go for some Viking builds, but it really turned out to be a lovely little village on the trails that we made all in about 4 hours. So yeah, definitely was fun, and definitely something that I want to do more of this year. I can't really make a list like this and not mention any ruins, because especially early on, this was kind of my thing. I started rebuilding some of the ruins on the island, and we finished actually the mountain ruins on the island earlier in 2024, and that definitely was one of the cooler bases that I did on the island. And of course, with Scorched Earth dropping, we went into the desert. I rebuilt some of the desert ruins, create like a little street over there, which was a really fun project as well, but there was something a little bit more challenging, because some of these desert ruins were a lot more intact than the ones on the island, meaning that was less room for a lot of their own creativity, and yeah, more already pretty much finished builds. And then we went on the center, and I think these were my least favorite ruins. They look amazing. It's really easy to turn them into a base, because all you really need is a foundation and a gate, and then you're pretty much done, which might be great for some, but for me as a builder, it does make it a little bit more boring. But I won't deny, these are great build locations. They are great base locations, because it's so easy and quick to make a pretty big base. I did rebuild a few of them to show kind of how I would do it, because placing the foundations down is pretty much the most important step for all of these ruin rebuilds, because they kind of determine what you're able to do with the rest of the structures. But recently, my love for ruins was resparked on Extinction. We actually rebuilt the snow ruins there. The normal, smaller snow ruins, and also the bigger snow ruins as well, which actually turned out really, really cool. And it was very nice to actually have some of these ruins again that really sparked my interest and my motivation to rebuild them. So I'm hoping that from now on other maps we'll get some really cool ruins as well, because it's always a fun project to do. And let's take a look at some of the maps and look at the specific builds. Like on Scorched Earth, of course, we really embraced the frontier vibe, the western vibe. The little starter base that we made was a little ranch building, and eventually we also added in a little train station, because of course those were the big new things. We had new structures for the first time ever. We had the new train things, so of course we wanted to go western. And going western we certainly did, because we built a whole western town with a main street with different shops like the saloon, the general store, the gun store. I don't know, we did so many. The Undertaker, of course the sheriff's office, the post office, a big central train station, a little church, and maybe my favorite one, a big dino barn that is big enough to hold all of your dinos very, very safe, and actually really looks like the typical barn you probably imagine when you think of a western barn. And of course, one build I had to do whilst we were out in the desert was build a proper pyramid. And I think the build that we did turned out to be pretty nice. I tried to spice it up a little bit by using the plant pots that were of course also added with the Bob Tall Tales DLC for Scorched Earth, which really makes it able to decorate your base in a nice way. And especially in the desert, bringing out the greenery really just helps, yeah, turn your base a little bit more colorful. Then, of course, it was time to delve into Aberration, and I built some steampunk builds like a community center for my community server, which was basically a big clock tower with a little hall connected to it. But of course, on my own world, I built a whole steampunk town, including a little starter base house. We built a giant Dino Pen battle arena, pretty much, which was a giant build. We built a big storage and crafting hall, which definitely embraced the steampunk vibe in the best way possible. Of course, we had to build a little Zeppelin as well as a Zeppelin hangar to park it as well. And yeah, it's really fun playing around with these steampunk vibes. But I'm still really sad that we didn't really get any pipes, because I feel like for steampunk, that was kind of a no-brainer. They should have added some kind of pipes to decorate your base with. Although using some of the water reservoirs definitely helps. And of course, now with mods, it's easy to get the right decoration for those types of bases too. But Aberration, of course, also introduces cliff platforms, so that's one that we did as well. We built a little cliff platform starter base, although ironically, this is one of the last builds that I did on Aberration, but I still think it's a great way. And of course, it's a very easy way, because pretty much anywhere, any map, you can quite easily place a cliff platform at one of the random cliff sides and just build this base. But during Aberration, it also came time to celebrate Halloween, so I built this abandoned mansion. You might just build this for Halloween. You could also just build it every other time of the year, of course. You don't have to make it into an abandoned mansion, although I do think that's a great theme, even if you just use it as your proper base. Because from the outside, the atmosphere of this build is really, really fun, using signs to kind of board up your windows and leaving some stuff broken, I think is a really cool vibe. Then it was time to dive into the Greek map of Astraeos. This is one of my favorite maps, and it will be one of my main maps going forward, because it's only partially released. It's only the free version so far. It's about 30% of the map. It's already huge. There's some really good variation in the terrain already, and we're getting much more this year. So I'm very excited for this. We of course jumped in with a little Greek starter base, using some of the new Astraeos structures that were released alongside this mod, which are really cool for some Greek builds. Then of course on my community server, I built a giant Greek city together with my tribe. This thing is ridiculously huge, but it's really cool to see what you can actually do if you work together with a group of people. And this is actually, funnily enough, one of the few builds that I fully built in survival, well, together with a tribe, of course. I didn't do all the building myself, but still, it's a giant build to do in survival. I'm not sure that we want to do something quite as big again, but it's definitely looked really cool. And then over on my own world, I also built a big villa. It's a Roman villa. Is it a Greek villa? I don't know. It just looks like a really cool villa with a nice little inner courtyard, a big villa at the back, and then also at the entrance you have some stable structures, some nice looking entrances, and a hidden cellar as well for all your wine, dinos, or whatever you want to hide in your secret basement. And in the swamp, also kind of for Halloween, we decided to build a little witch's hut, which definitely embraces the theme of Halloween very well. This was more of a modded build. We used Architect Structures Remastered again to get the steeper and curved roof pieces, which I think really add to the vibe of this place. And also just because the original Swamp on Astraeos just has that very cool lighting, which instantly makes it very moody, which is the perfect setting for this type of build. And to celebrate Halloween, Fear Ascended, that was around this time. Yeah, still really like this build. Maybe not necessarily as a base to live in, but it's definitely a cool thematic build. And then I tried to challenge myself to build a simple all-in-one, maybe even day one starter base as well. It's kind of just a nice round build where you have space to bring your dinos to the inside, you have space for all of your early game crafting and storage, and you have your bedroom, kind of all you need. And it's quite easily built with mostly just using wood and thatch structures. And of course, if you do have the steampunk skins, the frontier skins, you can easily spice up the design just by adding a few of those around to turn your little easy day one hut into something that looks a little bit nicer and that, yeah, you can proudly use for a fair amount of time, I think, before you run out of space. And then another survival project was Rivendell. This was another tribe base. We built kind of a medieval village, and for my house, I somehow decided, yeah, why not try to build like a Rivendell-inspired build. I really like the way this turned out. This is, again, using a lot of the architect structures, remastered structures, which is probably the best build mod out there. Just adds a lot of extra pieces that make it possible to go for some more creative shapes that aren't necessarily possible within normal ARK. And yeah, this was just a really fun project. We were waiting, of course, for Extinction to drop. We just had the new region of Australis, so it was nice to build something in survival, kind of relaxing, working together with the tribe. Yeah, really happy with the vibes of this place, and it is in probably one of the more beautiful biomes that I've ever seen on ARK. And as Extinction got a little 3-day delay, we decided to go ahead and build ourselves a little Christmas village while we waited. So I didn't build this myself, I built this together with 2 friends. And yeah, we decided to make a little Christmas village with some nice cozy houses down below. And then one of my friends built a big Santa's workshop, and I added a nice little train station and a little train that drives around the town all the time. And that really creates just a really atmospheric build, and definitely was a fun way to kind of celebrate Christmas vibes before diving into the wasteland chaos of Extinction. And speaking of Extinction, we started out Extinction, of course, and the first thing that I kind of got inspired to do with the new wasteland structures was building these shipping containers. Yeah, I thought that was just a very fun way to use those textures and to kind of create a very easy day one starter base that still looks good. It's basically still just a box, but it looks slightly nicer, and especially if you add a few more around and play with the shapes of them, I think you can definitely make some really cool wasteland suited builds that kind of feel very post-apocalyptic, which I kind of think that this is the best way to use these new structures. And then of course we also had to do a garage build. That's why I decided to turn the garage into a crane, because that's kind of what it reminded me of, like the bottom of a crane. So what I did is, well, I took the garage structure and I built a whole crane base on top of it, which it might not be the most practical base design, but I do think it makes for a really cool and unique base, which, yeah, he definitely will raise some eyes, but yeah, definitely a cool one. And especially with the little storage container still dangling from the front. Again, not the most practical, but it does look really cool in my opinion. And another build that I got inspired to do with these new wasteland structures was this factory, or more specifically an abandoned old factory that's kind of been retaken over by some of the scavengers in the wastelands. That's why some of the windows are a little bit more broken down. We've used some of the wasteland sections. We made some cool chimneys. We have a place for the tribe tower, and inside as well we have place for the garage, your crafting, your storage. Yeah, I think this is a really fun base design that kind of offers everything you need in a really unique way. Just painting some normal stone textures to get the kind of brick look, and then using all of the other Bob Tall skins, because I've used the steampunk pillars for this, I've used the frontier windows for this, and then of course I used the wasteland roofs and pillars for this as well. So yeah, definitely a nice blend of all of these different structures into one build. And there we go. Those are all of my best builds in 2024. If you've made it all the way to the end of this video, please let me know what your favorite is down in the comments below. And as I said in the intro, if you have suggestions for things that I should build this year, please let me know as well. Thank you so much for all the support last year, and let's make 2025 a great one too. Thanks for watching, and for now, goodbye.